Death of a Dystopian by Alec Wilkinson. He writes a 7-page article in the New Yorker, and I find it fascinating what was missed in this article, all the different things that were not covered, yet what he chose to actually cover in this. Now, in speaking with Alec Wilkinson, it took me probably about 30 seconds to realize that this guy did not know very much about this case. Didn't know about the bullet hole in the living room that the police missed for 1 month. In this article, you're pretty much given two choices, okay? You can either believe that David Crowley is guilty or that the government killed him. That's pretty much all of the choices we're given here. How a libertarian's film project and his fate fueled the alt-right's deepest fears. I don't know what this guy is talking about here. I don't know what this guy is talking about here when he's talking about this alt-right crap. What does the alt-right have to do with any of this? Alright, this is not about alt-right, this is not about left, this is not about right, it's not about any of that. It's just about truth. First of all, has he read the police reports? Has he looked at the crime scene photos? Because I can tell you, when the people came out, when the documentary film came out to film me, the guy that I spoke with had no interest in looking at those photos. Well, if you're not going to look at those photos, if you're not going to look at the 94 pages, of course you're not going to understand where we're coming from. But if you're not willing to do that, don't write an article and don't make a fucking documentary. This is serious stuff. Now, if you have looked at these photos and if you have looked at the 94 pages and you still don't understand where a person like me is coming from, I don't know what to tell you. Here's what I can tell you. I don't know what happened. This article continually tells me what happened based on the documentary that I have yet to see. That also is going to tell me what happened. Well, I had many people from the very beginning trying to tell me what happened. And it all comes back to the same thing, the broken record of Greg Fernandez Jr. Where is your proof? So let's go through this article that fueled the alt-right deepest fears. I mean, what kind of crap is that? It all goes back to this secret knowledge that these people have, and this is why David Crowley is guilty. But we can't share it with you yet. First, we gotta go and go to every film festival that we could possibly get it into. Then we gotta sell it to somebody. So again, where does it come down to? It comes down to money. Yes, it is an interesting story. To me, the interesting thing is not just what David Crowley did, it's how the police reacted to what David Crowley did, to what they claim he did. So to me, there's many stories here. It isn't just, is David Crowley innocent or guilty? It's also, what did the police do to come to their theory? This article really doesn't cover that. Okay, it kind of glosses over that. Here's what I think really happened. I think Alec Wilkinson wrote a shitty article, 7-page article. I think there was a lot of things that he did not cover, and a lot of things he chose not to cover. Okay, but this alt-right crap is really bothering me, so I keep going back to that. Alright, so the journal was a life report, since I suspect my feelings right now in nostalgia and reflection might be of value. The timing of this article matching up with the documentary is not a coincidence. It's not an accident. Like I told the people that showed up at the house when they interviewed me, I told the guy later on, man, you guys did not have to be so secretive. If you're going to try to set out to find the truth, then be truthful. We didn't know who was making this film. We didn't know what this film was for, and we didn't care, because that's how strongly we believe in what we say. But on Facebook, there is a page called Justice for David Crowley and Family, which says that its purpose is to, quote, help to clear the good name of David Crowley. The page is overseen by an accountant in Minnesota named Dan Hinnon. He and Greg Fernandez Jr., a tech worker in California, conduct long discussions on YouTube in which they find fault with the police investigation and ask why someone whose future seems so promising would kill himself. I don't know if that's what we're discussing. We discuss more of how the police messed this whole thing up and how certain people jumped to the conclusion that David Crowley was guilty and totally ignored or totally just glossed over all of the things that the police did wrong. That's what we're talking about. To say that the reason why the police missed the bullet hole is because of the Christmas tree, where the Christmas tree was, is bull, because we can see exactly where the Christmas tree was. It was not that close to the ceiling. There is no way that the police would have missed it. The police moved the Christmas tree at least once, so there's no reason for them not to have seen this large bullet hole in the living room. Alec goes on to say the journal is dominated by Crowley's notes as he wrote Gray State. What he wished for it to be, his anxieties about whether he could manage it, and the audience he imagined it would reach. He also wrote about his ambitions in general, to have a screenplay produced by 2016, to be a millionaire by 2017, his feelings for Kamel. And here's a quote from David. God, I love that woman. Strong, beautiful, ferocious, and deadly intelligent. And his determination to be a good father. So he's writing about his determination to be a good father, and then he goes ahead and kills his daughter. So as the entries go on, I guess, it starts to get darker now, okay? Where David Crowley writes, I'm expecting to wake up somebody else. Vast personality changes are happening too fast to write about every day. I am being prepped for some slide into oblivion or destiny. This is what it comes down to. And this is what Alec Wilkinson says. David Crowley was losing his mind, and he didn't seem to know it. Somebody's feeding that to Alec. This guy does not know David Crowley, okay? This guy, I mean, that's a huge statement to really say. Somebody is feeding him information that will lead to that conclusion. Journals of people overtaken by psychosis are rare. That's the very next sentence. So David Crowley was losing his mind and he didn't seem to know it, and this is a rare case. It's pretty much what the guy is saying. I hope this guy's not a journalist. This guy cannot be a journalist. I mean, I took 2 high school journalism classes, and I know there's certain things you do and certain things that you don't do if you are a journalist. I'm not a journalist, but I don't know if this guy, I don't think this guy is either, so I guess we're in the same boat. He goes on to say David Crowley owned a number of self-hypnosis recordings meant to overcome his insecurities. Again, somebody's feeding him that. The reason I say this, somebody's feeding Alec this, is because the guy obviously has not done a lot of research on this case. He thought that the convulsive things that were happening to him were the result of his endeavor to become more confident, poised, and commanding. He thought he was developing a new self. Where are all of these strange things? And where are all of the conclusions, the rush to judgment? Where is that in this article? It's missing. The only one who knows for sure is God. And that's good enough for me. Okay, in 2007, David was transferred to Fort Hood in Texas, and in 2008, he met Kamel at a bar in Waco. The next day, he introduced her to another soldier as his girlfriend. Kamel, who was a senior at Baylor University, lived with her mother and father, Nyla and Anjamalam, and her younger sister, Sidra. 3 years earlier, they had come from Pakistan. There, the girls and their mother had each had a driver, and the house was run by servants. In the U.S., they had to learn to manage for themselves. Within weeks of meeting Kamel, David found out that he was being stop-lossed. That is, his service was being extended without his consent. Furthermore, he was being sent to Afghanistan. He immediately asked Kamel to marry him. Kamel told her father that she was serious about David. So this is what Anjamalam, Kamel's father, told Alec Wilkinson for this article. While I was talking to her, meaning Kamel, David comes to the house for the first time. He came in and he was ready to fight with me. So Kamel told Anjum that they were getting married in 2 days and that David was leaving in 2 weeks. Anjum said, I was completely in shock. Finally, I said, fine, if you guys love each other, who the hell am I to come between you? So even though David came in there ready to fight, Anjum goes on, and it seems like he and David eventually are on good terms. So David so resented being stop-loss that he told his commanding officer in Afghanistan that he couldn't be responsible for another soldier's life, and he was assigned to deliver mail. Kamel got pregnant in late 2008 during one of David's leaves. When he was finally discharged in June of 2009, he was disgruntled, and he told Kamel not to come to the ceremony for returning soldiers. Instead, he had her wait outside in the car. I don't want the army controlling how I reunite with my wife, he told another soldier. Rania was born in August of 2009. In September, the family moved from Waco to Minnesota, where Kamel knew no one. For the first 6 months, she was miserable, her sister said. She would call crying, "It's so depressing here and it's always cold." Okay, the gray state began in the summer of 2010 when Danny Mason, whom David had met through a professor at film school, sent David an email with links to websites devoted to conspiracies and suppressed information. Conspiracies and suppressed information. It's very similar to the case that we're dealing with now. How ironic. According to Mason, he came back in 36 hours, having stayed up for 24 hours, and said, "You're on to something. Let's see where this goes." Before writing a first draft, David and Danny Mason wrote scenes for the trailer, which they shot with Mitch Heil in 2011. It is 2 minutes 40 seconds long, and it cost $6,000. Over the summer, Kamel's mother received a diagnosis of cervical cancer. Kamel and her father argued over the phone about treatments, and afterwards she and David decided that her family was trying to manipulate her and that she could no longer speak to them. The following day, though, David heard Kamel on the phone talking heatedly in Urdu and became angry. After they argued, she wrote, "I expected him to show me a little more compassion." She told herself that she would feel better in the morning, but she had nightmares. "I started to experience degrees of separation between David and I," she wrote. "I guess I forgot we were 2 different people in 2 different bodies." Alright, now here we go, and Alec then goes on to say, "A psychosis can overwhelm and disable a person, or it can appear episodically in the form of disordered thoughts that are themselves an attempt to ward off a collapse. At the end of July, David suffered a psychic crisis that involved a deep understanding stretching my mind past what my body can tolerate." He went on to write that he had undergone, quote, "a 20-minute physical episode of visions of pure deep horror, long insight stretching unbroken like a panorama. The vision subsided, however, and he returned to his regular life, taking Rania to their sitter, having family dinners, reading and writing, and working out in the backyard with Kamel. The moment of my purpose has arrived, and if the universe awaits my consent for the go-ahead, then I say, do your worst, you filthy, sticky bitch. I know you're going to reward and seduce me before killing off what I love and burying what I build and destroying me as awfully as possible in horrible retribution for having thrust my ability so far into your black void that generations hence will still be expanding on what I started, settling the void, conquering the dark, until the greater objective is served." Very interesting quote there. It's as if the writing and making of the gray state were a means to containing the violent fantasies within him. I'm going to read that again. It is as if the writing and making of gray state were a means of containing the violent fantasies within him. And when the project faltered, they swamped him. So again, very similar to what Mitch Heil said, the gray state killed him. The mics reacted as producers do, by considering the script's merits and difficulties. My first pass from story content was, "This is kind of a roadmap for the next American Revolution," Michael O'Donnell told Alec Wilkinson. My second pass was breaking it down to what it costs. When David finally heard from them on September 26, he said the Gray State might be better as a TV series. They did not offer him a contract he had counted on. David was devastated. Making Gray State was his whole world, Citrus said. David began to have trouble sleeping, and for an hour one night he lay awake and cried. "I guess the big weight created a lot of anxiety that needed resolution the situation couldn't provide," he wrote. "Hence the bad weather. I'm serious. Moment by moment for a long time the weather has been following my mood." He stopped saying that he was going to be famous. He didn't say that they were moving to California anymore either, a friend named Chris Peck told Alec Wilkinson. All he said was that was a pipe dream. As if to salvage years of work, David put aside Gray State for a documentary that he called Gray State The Rise, which he assembled from interviews with himself, friends, and internet commentators, news footage, and a brief interview he had once filmed with Alex Jones. It expresses the belief that the Gray State has arrived. Working on it possessed him as entirely as writing Gray State had. And here we go. To further the brand, he planned to make the documentary available free. So working on this, quote, possessed him as entirely as writing Gray State had. So now David was possessed He's possessed with, first he was possessed with making this film, now he's possessed with a documentary. Possession, control, keywords, lots of keywords here. Alright, so here we go. Meanwhile, he and Kamel stopped returning phone calls and texts and emails. Anjem sent Kamel a photograph of her mother, Nyla, in the hospital, hoping to provoke her into speaking to him. Immediately, he received a call from David, who said that he and Kamel wanted nothing more to do with him or the rest of the family. Sidra and her fiancé drove from Waco to Minnesota to check up on Kamel. A few months earlier, Anjem had lent David and Kamel a car as a pretext. Sidra planned to tell them that he needed it back. She would leave her own car for them. So Sidra and her boyfriend at the time, now her husband, drove from Waco to Minnesota on October 16th. They drove for 16 hours, and they arrived at around 7 that evening. They knocked on the door, and Sidra said, "I'm here to see my sister." David apparently told her, "We want nothing to do with you. I thought I made that clear," and he shut that door. She knocked again. David said, "Go sit in the car." Vincent, the boyfriend, saw a shadow on the wall behind David and felt sure that it was Kamel's. When David came out to the car, he said that there was no way Sidra could see her sister. Sidra said that they had come to exchange cars. Sidra said that he needed an hour to get the car ready, but he would return it only if they took both cars, which meant Sidra would have to drive 16 hours to Waco by herself. She said she couldn't. "Fine," David said. "Deal's off." Then he went back in the house. Vinny and I looked at each other like, "What now?" Sidra told Alec Wilkinson. Vincent knocked on the door again, and David came out. Vincent extended his hand, and David hesitated, then shook it. "Her mom needs her daughter," Vincent said. "You said an hour, right?" When they returned, Sidra saw David watching them from a picture window beside the front door. The car was on the street, and on the dashboard there was a photograph of Kamel, Sidra, and Nyla. Kamel had written on the back of it, "I have always loved you and Mom, and always will." Sidra and Vincent decided to leave their car for Kamel in case she ever needed to flee. Sidra wrote, "I love you too" on the back of the photograph and left it on the dashboard, and they drove away quickly. Alright, so now we're going to get into the article where it talks about this pact, alright? You ready for this? A mania shared by two people, one of whom appears to be dominant, is called a delusion by proxy, and is rare. Again, this is a rare case. But hey, let's not worry about too much facts. Let's just call it rare and create a story that we want to present to the public that will conveniently match the documentary film that's coming out that's going to say about the same thing. But hey, two different sources, right? Wrong. Okay, the treatment begins by separating the people sharing the delusions. David's entry for October 30th, 2014 cryptically says, "Kamel got raptured today. She's still here." That morning he had gone to Home Depot, and when he returned, Kamel came into the kitchen and asked him to hold her. She said something was very wrong, something about "do not fear, sweet body, for we have felt this pain together," David said in a recording that he made immediately afterwards on his phone. He went on, paraphrasing her, quote, "Don't worry about the pain, because you do not know how to feel pain. You will return to the dust in your dark slumber, and I will be gone. I have my mission," she had told David. She said she had heard a woman's scary voice and asked if he had heard it. Sounding distraught, she reproduced the voice. "I've warned you. I've warned you. Then I want you. Please come with me. Please come with me. Your place won't come to me. There's nothing left here." David went into his office and shut the door. "This took a lot out of her," he said into his phone. He had held her while she began to shake and weep and howl, and then she said, "This is what rapture is." Kamel came into the room then and lay down on the couch. "You said you were Egyptian," David told her. "You said you'd come from very far to find me and Rainey, and I need to come with you, and there's not much time." The primary emotion was that of desperate love, like hopeless love, he continued. "And on some level, your soul has committed to mine, and we're going to go somewhere, and Rainey is coming with." Those were the last words, Kamel said, her voice pitched just high above a whisper. demons don't just show up on your front door. You have to let them in. So that's where the occultist thing, where the spirituality thing, where the Bohemian Grove owl thing, that's where all that comes into play. And a very interesting quote where David mentions the Antichrist and having a soft spot for the Antichrist. These are not normal things. The week before Christmas, David and Kamel visited their friend Chris Peck. They were uncontrollably, zealously happy. David gave me some books, one about how to succeed in Hollywood, one about writing, and then he handed me a bunch of notes for a screenplay I was writing, and he gave me back video games I had lent him. He gave me back everything I had ever lent him. Kamel wished me Merry Christmas, and as quickly as they were in, they were out. High spirits, everything looks good, but somehow all of this is again leading to their downfall. This is 1 week before Christmas. They tell him Merry Christmas. They're celebrating Christmas. They're obviously celebrating Christmas. There's no doubt. Alright, and Alec writes again, high spirits are characteristic of people resolved on suicide. Even though they won't leave a suicide note, you won't leave any indication of a suicide. Here they are talking about a pact. Okay, this guy is being very sneaky about his writing here, because they're talking about a pact. But he's very clear, he's very careful about what he says, but we know what he's saying. It is why so many stories of suicide include someone saying, "We thought we had got better." The decision often gives people a feeling of being released from their troubles. Dan Luttrell served with David in Afghanistan, but he hadn't spoken with him in a while. Then late one night, a few days before Christmas, quote, "I was sitting on the computer," Dan said, "drinking, and I got a message from him. They discussed the army and their lives in Gray State. Quote, he was drinking absinthe, and I was drinking whiskey and beer. After about 2 hours, Luttrell said that he was ready for bed, and David asked him to delete their exchange. His exact words, this is a quote from Dan Luttrell, his exact words were, 'If you're truly my brother and my friend, you'll do it. I promise you'll understand soon.' The last entry in the journal reads, 'I am no one. It is everyone else who is someone.' On Christmas morning, he makes a list of plans for the coming year. Christmas 6-day countdown meme. It will be a new year, he wrote, and he reminded himself that December 30th was the last day to crowdfund. Planning for the future. More planning for the future. How much evidence do we have that David was planning for the future and not necessarily planning to kill himself? Then with the pistol that he kept in his safe in the bedroom, he shot Kamel and Rainey. So all of a sudden, right? So here he is. He's talking about the last day for the crowdfunding on December 30th. Then he goes and he decides to shoot his wife and his daughter as they lay on the living room floor. Sometime later, he sat down beside them and shot himself. No mention of the bullet, no mention of anything. It's just, okay, that's it. So here we go from David writing his last entry. And all of a sudden, then, with a pistol he kept in his safe in the bedroom, he shot Kamel and Renya as they lay on the living room floor. That's a quick jump. The next morning, Dan Jr. left presents for David and Kamel and Renya on the doorsteps. In the living room, David had done something the police omitted from their incident report and waited months before telling the families. Months. In his hands, covered in his wife's blood, he stood on the couch and wrote on the wall, Allahu Akbar, which means God is great. On the floor by Kamel, he had placed a Quran open to a prayer of forgiveness. A few days after the bodies were discovered, David's father and sister went into the house. Apparently they went into that. Everybody goes into this house and nobody sees the bullet in the living room ceiling. Got it. Now, if it's a few days later that they go into this house, they obviously would see the writing on the wall, right? No, because the police had painted that wall white, so they painted over it. Cleaners had to cut out the floorboards where the blood had warped them, so it was clear where the bodies had lain. And then there was questions if some of that blood had seeped down into the basement walls, because on one of the basement walls, it does look like there is blood. There's a reason why Allahu Akbar was written in blood on that wall. And yes, it does make sense to me that it is a satanic angle, that it is a demonic angle, an occultist angle. But that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it fact. Mason Hendricks was also in the house And when he looked up and saw that there was a bullet hole in the living room, again, not mentioned in this article. I told Alec Wilkinson about that. He found it strange. I told his fact checker. She found it strange. Mason Hendricks found it strange. Everybody finds it strange, but nobody wants to talk about it. That's even more strange. Danny Mason maintains David's Gray State Facebook page, posting videos and remarks every few weeks, usually critical of the government. He and Dan Sr. own the rights to the concept, and while David Sr. is uncertain what outcome he prefers, Danny Mason still hopes to make Gray State. So even after the guy dies, even after the guy allegedly kills his family, you're really going to move forward with this movie? You must not be thinking clearly. Because if you really think you're going to make this movie and you're going to make money off of this, that's pretty sick to me. So I will debate Danny Mason on this anytime. Alright, so there's the article there. Just wanted to cover that and get that off of my chest. Feel a lot better now. Might be one of the only times I ever am forced to read an article from the New Yorker. Hopefully I never have to do it again. See you next time.